Good morning, everyone. Here we are. It's another day for us. It's STEM S100, another day of world history with this new form of school, hopefully as temporary as possible. So this is day 2, but it's day 1 for our block 4 classes and 6 classes that normally meet today. It's March 18th. If you had class yesterday, you want to make sure you're getting your work in. And I'll explain more about that. And I'm sure you've been getting emails about that as well. So just want to take a few minutes to go over the things we normally go over in the beginning of class. I could talk about the news. I hope you're getting the news while you're home all day. You're checking in. We know that the death totals in the U.S. have passed over 100. The federal government has upped the ante a little bit with things, and maybe we'll take another day this week to talk about other things going on. But the other news is that we did still have primary results yesterday. So if you're coloring in your maps, you're still doing your maps, you can do that. So Biden won all 3 states that had primaries yesterday: Florida, Illinois, and Arizona. So we have Florida, we have Arizona, which is next to California down here, and Illinois, this skinny state next to, you already colored in Idaho and Missouri. So Biden did get all 3 states. Now Ohio, next to Pennsylvania here, was supposed to have an election yesterday. They did postpone it until June, and that's a big deal because Ohio is a swing state and people do want to see how it goes. So this was a big win for Biden yesterday. Sanders did have a press conference last night, probably as presidential as we've seen him, sitting behind a desk, and sort of gave his plan on what should be happening right now with the federal government as far as people getting paid, mortgages being due, what about student loans? And he's still a senator, whether he wins this or not. So he still has a stake here in things. So right now, the delegate totals are Biden has 1,347 and Sanders has 861. For those of you who usually ask, what about Tulsi Gabbard? She still technically is in the race. People are still voting for other people that are still on the ballot: Bloomberg, Warren, even though they dropped out, and they're usually placing above Gabbard is. But I looked up the results. Gabbard won 2,733 votes in Arizona, 8,991 votes in Illinois, and 8,694 votes in Florida. And that was either 0.5 or 0.6% of the vote in all the 3 states. So there you go. I tried to find something for on this day in history. And since we've been learning about the French Revolution, I connected something with that. So on this day in 1793, there was a Flanders campaign of the French Revolution, which was the Battle of Neerwinden. Now, Flanders, if you remember, is actually a part of Belgium. The people of Flanders, especially at this time, would not call themselves Belgian. They would call themselves Flemish. But we talked a lot about the domestic changes with the French Revolution. We didn't talk much about the international effects. And what you have to realize is that France had a monarchy, right? And most of Europe had a monarchy at this time. And many of the other countries were afraid that this idea of overthrowing the monarchy would spread. So many of the countries surrounding France were supportive of the king. And so all these, there was actually like wars, right? Besides just the revolution at home, which is sort of how Napoleon came to power. I think we mentioned that a little bit when we discussed things in the Napoleon video. So this was a major Austrian victory over the armies of revolutionary France. It helped to, for at least a little while, get the French out of the Austrian Netherlands. So Austria, its kingdom, had some people up there. It also caused the downfall of a French general. His name was Charles Dumouriez. And I'm going to talk a little bit about him in a second. This was a deadly battle. Of the Austrian and Dutch forces, 97 officers were killed, as well as 2,762 soldiers, and sadly, because everyone asks about the horses, 779 horses. Now, the French, between killed and wounded, lost about 4,000, plus 1,000 of their men were captured, and 30 of their artillery pieces were captured, so they could not use them to fight with. I do not know how many French horses lost their lives. Now, a little bit about Charles Dumouriez, because you guys like messed up history. All right. So Charles Dumouriez was a French general during the French Revolution. He did come from a noble class, his family, and he did not really think, however, that a king should be killed. He so some people like his beliefs, if you study them, sort of changed over time. Excuse me. So he was a member of the Jacobin Club. We learned about the Jacobins. But this is where he's known as a traitor. He actually, after this downfall, after this loss, deserted to the Austrians, right? And then a lot of people are like, he's a traitor, like he was this, he was that, and no country really wanted him. And finally, because remember, French and British were at war, the English accepted him, and he received a pension. So doing so miserably in his life, he actually wrote memoirs, try to make some money, but also to try to sort of bring some honor back to his name. But in his memoirs, he writes about this feeling of everyone thinking of him as a traitor and no one wanting him in his country. So in his memoirs, he says, to be abandoned by the world, to be the outcast of society, to be compelled to fly from city to city, to seek an asylum from the rage and madness of his countrymen, who imagine they will serve the public cause and rid the world of a traitor if they can but plunge a dagger into his breast. Compelled to live among strangers under the disguise of an assumed name. So he probably changed his name as well. I also imagined a little bit, because this is some messed up history as well. He was married for a while to Mademoiselle de Brézé. She was, in fact, his cousin. Now, I tried to look, was it a first cousin, second cousin? I don't know. It just says cousin. And they had a relationship for some while, but to his dismay, she was very religious. This was a Catholic country, and the Catholic Church was sort of being attacked a bit during the Revolution, and she went to a convent to become a nun. But she was in ill health. Living as a nun was too harsh for her, so she returned to normal civilian life. There she got the smallpox. And in a book by Ralph Neville, he writes, the smallpox completely destroyed all vestiges of her good looks. And about 12 years later, Dumouriez went to visit her, and she was about 30. And it was described as, the meeting was extremely emotional. Dumouriez threw himself into her arms, exclaiming, Comme tu es changé, mais je t'aime toujours. Let's see if my 4 years of French pay off there. That means, how changed you are, but I still love you. He then left and returned when she was sick again, and spent 28 days nursing her back to health. And then again, he begged her to marry him. And it wasn't easy to financially afford getting married with dowries and all that time. And since she was considered like still belonging to the church, he actually had to sell 5,000 of his books. And they got married. But then within 1 or 2 years, he was cheating on her while he was away at battles. There was a woman, Baron Brevet. He complained that he didn't like how pious his wife was, how religious she was. He read a lot of Voltaire, and while he still considered himself Catholic and religious, he's like, but not as extreme as she was. And interesting to note is during these Revolutionary Wars and the Napoleonic Wars, lots of wives and even girlfriends traveled with the camps, and they often wore like the men's army uniforms and basically went about as men and helped out. Things we should learn about more with Women's History Month, right? That they actually played active roles in the military under assumed names many times. Well, Dumouriez ended up having relationships with some of those women as well, and they separated. So I just thought we could all use some crazy stories like we share in class sometimes to make things as normal as possible. Of course, you don't have to write that all in your timeline, right? So things you want to make sure you're doing today. Please mark present under the attendance mark. It should be on Canvas. If there's any issues, I'll make sure, it's taken care of right away. Update your maps. I have a video for you on the guillotine. Please watch that. And then you'll see an assignment, there's a Canvas. There's 4 questions. You only have to answer 3. You choose which ones, but make sure you're answering them completely and fully, like the directions ask you, so you can get it. It's not just graded for completion. I will actually be reading through these. And make sure you're citing evidence from the guillotine video to use as support of your answers, not just the excerpts in the reading, so that I know you do that and you'll get credit for it as well. Okay, I'll keep checking in with you guys. Pretty soon I'm going to start posting polls on things you might want us to do or add or change. So as we go forward, everything is as smooth as possible. Miss you guys. Hope all is well.